On the day of our 6th wedding anniversary, my husband Leonard, who was preparing a surprise for me, unexpectedly fell into the sea, leaving no remains. Upon receiving the devastating news, I felt no sorrow whatsoever. Shortly after Leonard's funeral, I promptly cancelled his household registration and contacted a lawyer to divide the property that belonged to me. This was because I knew Leonard had faked his death. His mistress outside was pregnant, and for the child he had long desired, Leonard devised this scheme to deceive me. Later, Leonard went to great lengths to find me while holding his illegitimate child. However, upon seeing me open the door with a protruding belly, he staggered back in shock. You can have children?" Of course I could, the one who could not was Leonard himself. In our 6 years of marriage, I had never become pregnant. I underwent countless examinations and consumed numerous traditional Chinese medicines and folk remedies, yet I still could not conceive. Due to my inability to get pregnant, my mother-in-law Margaret harbored significant resentment toward me, showing me no kindness and even publicly calling me a hen that lays no eggs. Whenever Margaret upset me, my husband Leonard steadfastly supported me, never despising me for my infertility but instead treating me with even greater care. I had always believed our bond was unbreakable, convinced I had found a man to entrust my life to. On the day of our 6th anniversary, Leonard prepared a highly memorable party for me. He booked a luxurious cruise ship and invited prominent figures from South City to host a grand commemorative dinner at sea. Unexpectedly, due to unforeseen circumstances, Leonard accidentally fell overboard during an inspection on the ship, and his body was never recovered. When the bad news arrived, I fainted on the spot. Unable to accept Leonard's departure, I blamed myself excessively, attributing his death to my own actions, bearing all the accusations, developing severe psychological disorders, and deteriorating physically. My mother-in-law Margaret, who already disliked me, incessantly insulted and berated me daily because of Leonard's death, making my life unbearable. Finally, on the anniversary of Leonard's death, after Margaret once again pointed at my nose and cursed me as the murderer who killed Leonard, I chose to end my life. I leaped from the balcony of a high-rise building, my body shattering into pieces in a horrific manner. Not long after my death, Leonard, who had been dead for a year, returned. He was not alone, accompanying him was my half-sister Lena, holding a child who was 100 days old. It turned out that Leonard had secretly hooked up with Lena, the daughter of my father's mistress and my stepmother Vivian. Lena became pregnant, and Leonard desperately wanted the child. Thus, he orchestrated this fake death charade to deceive me. My suicide conveniently fulfilled their family of 3. Leonard, with Lena and the child, hypocritically shed a few tears at my grave before soon holding a high-profile wedding with Lena in the country. His marriage to Lena turned my suicide into an utter joke. Perhaps heaven took pity on me, for I was reborn. I returned to the day of our 6th wedding anniversary, which was also the day Leonard had his accident. In this life, I intended to play along thoroughly with Leonard in this game of death. Time quickly reached 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Sitting on the sofa, I glanced at my watch, and fittingly, my mother-in-law Margaret's heart-wrenching wails echoed from outside. "My son. You're still so young. How could you heartlessly abandon me? How will I live from now on?" The long-awaited drama had finally begun. A few minutes later, Margaret, crying uncontrollably with tears and snot streaming down her face, was supported into the room by Lena's mother, my father's mistress and stepmother Vivian. "Dear in-law, please restrain your grief. Don't harm your health with crying." While Vivian consoled Margaret verbally, her gaze turned to me sitting on the sofa, flashing a malicious glint in her eyes. In a shrill voice, "Iris. Leonard has had an accident. While preparing a surprise for you, he accidentally fell into the sea, and after several hours of search, nothing was found. In my previous life, upon hearing of Leonard's accident, I was so distraught I could barely stand. In this life, knowing the truth, I sternly rebuked Vivian. What nonsense are you spouting? You shameless mistress dared to curse my husband, you can't stand to see me living well, can you? It's true. Leonard really had an accident. I'm not lying to you, ultimately, Leonard's mishap was because of you. Before Vivian could finish, Margaret lunged at me wailing. You jinx. You barren jinx. You've been married into our family for 6 years, and I tolerated your inability to bear children, but you demanded a surprise that killed my son. Give me back my son's life. In my previous life, immersed in grief over Leonard's death, I believed he truly perished while preparing a surprise for me. I took all the blame upon myself, allowing Margaret to slap me, pull my hair, punch and kick me to vent her anger without complaint. In this life, there would be no such leniency. Margaret lunged beside me intending to strike, but I seized her hand firmly. Unable to hit me, Margaret spewed profanities. Vivian, who had hoped to see me beaten, saw that I had restrained Margaret's hand preventing her from acting, and immediately approached. Let's talk calmly. Dear in-law. While uttering words of consolation, her hand reached to grab me. Iris, release your mother-in-law quickly, can't you see how upset she is now? As Vivian's hand extended to seize me, I swiftly removed the sharp hairpin from my hair and fiercely jabbed at both Vivian and Margaret. While stabbing, I shouted, You're lying to me. You dare curse my husband. I don't want to live anymore. Ah. I can't go on. Let's all die together. The hatred from 2 lifetimes made my strike swift and ruthless, raining down upon Vivian and Margaret. Vivian suffered injuries to her face, arms, and chest from countless stabs, howling in agony. Margaret fared no better, as I wielded the hairpin with fierce vigor, landing blows like raindrops on the 2 wretched women. The 2 hags never dreamed I would go berserk like this. They fled in panic, covering their heads, bursting out the door, with no trace of their initial aggressive demeanor. After I enacted this ruthless spectacle, both Margaret and Vivian were rushed to the hospital. The 2 hags had bloody wounds on their faces and hands from the hairpin stabs, wailing in pain all the way. Their disheveled state was photographed and posted online. Netizens, upon digging into the truth and learning of Leonard's accident, concluded that I deeply loved Leonard and had been driven mad by his death. Feigning madness served as the perfect disguise. In the following days, I wielded sharp weapons, attacking anyone who approached, driving them away with my frenzied behavior, deterring all from provoking me. My actions were so extreme that they frightened everyone. Leonard, who had changed his identity and planned to take Lena abroad, halted his plans. They sat down with Margaret and Vivian to devise countermeasures. The wretches believed their actions were concealed and no one knew their whereabouts. They never imagined that I had long ago spent a fortune hiring private investigators to monitor every move of Margaret, Vivian, and Lena. The contents of their secret meetings were fully recorded by the investigators and delivered to me. Upon meeting, the wretches immediately began criticizing me, especially the assaulted Vivian and Margaret, one with a face full of bloody holes, the other waving her injured arm, complaining to Leonard. Originally, that day we intended to intimidate Iris into submission, but that little wretch Iris seemed like a changed person, mad to the point of terror. Luckily we fled quickly, or the consequences would have been unimaginable. Leonard believed I was truly traumatized by his death, pondering for a moment before instructing Margaret, Mom, she loves me too much, it's normal for her to go mad temporarily unable to accept my death. In that case, don't disturb her anymore. Having suffered at my hands, Margaret was unwilling to let it go. Just let her off like that? Look what that wretch did to me. I wish I could kill her. I even planned to make her kneel all day at your funeral. In her current mad state, how could she obey you? To prevent any mishaps, let's keep the funeral simple. After all, I'm not really dead. If Iris causes a scene and the truth of my faked death is exposed, we'd lose more than we gain. Fearing I might do something terrifying in my madness, the wretches unanimously agreed not to notify me of Leonard's so-called funeral. In my previous life, at Leonard's funeral, I knelt before the fake memorial hall, crying hoarsely and fainting several times. In this life, they dared not torment me. Margaret gathered a few cloves, burned them, and placed the ashes in a box to establish a cenotaph for Leonard. The day after Leonard's burial, I took the household register to the police station to cancel Leonard's registration, then immediately initiated the battle for inheritance with Margaret. In my previous life, convinced I had caused Leonard's death, I was melancholic all day, with no energy to manage property matters. I relinquished all of Leonard's assets, giving them entirely to Margaret, keeping only our marital home as a memento. In this life, there would be no such generosity. As Leonard's legal wife, with no children, I was entitled to half of our marital community property and also half of Leonard's estate through inheritance rights. This time, I would claim every bit of the half that belonged to me. As for Margaret's half, it depended on whether she had the fortune to obtain it. Leonard's deregistration was processed very quickly, with the death certificate arranged by Margaret. I didn't need to expend effort. I directly took the death certificate prepared by Margaret to the police station and completed the deregistration in just a few minutes. I entrusted the remaining inheritance matters entirely to the lawyer. As Leonard was deemed deceased, half of his estate belonged to me, and half to Margaret. The lawyer I hired was the top-ranked in the industry. Upon accepting my commission, he proficiently began handling the property division. Thanks to Leonard's deliberately cultivated image as a devoted husband over the years, during our 6 years of marriage, he gifted me countless valuable jewels, luxury homes, cars, yachts, and private jets. These assets were all registered under my personal name, constituting my sole private property with no relation to Leonard. After precise accounting by the lawyer, it was discovered that Leonard's entire estate ultimately consisted only of company shares available for division. Upon learning I had arranged for a lawyer to liquidate the estate, Margaret was furious. She stormed to our villa cursing angrily, intending to confront me. I merely held a 3-foot-long sharp knife, smiling as I raised it, which made Margaret abandon her confrontational intentions. Compared to before, I seemed like a changed person, frequently threatening violence, appearing deranged. Leonard and the others believed I was severely traumatized because I loved him too much. Facing my deranged state made communication difficult, prompting Margaret, Leonard, and the group to urgently convene again. As the deceased Leonard naturally did not want to reveal himself and risk all previous efforts in contesting the estate with me. Thus, after deliberation, they unanimously decided to have my adulterous father Richard, who kept a mistress, persuade me. My father Richard arrived at the door with the scarred Vivian and their illegitimate daughter Lena. I watched indifferently as Richard, Vivian, and Lena entered. In my previous life, after Leonard's death, I had not seen Lena. In this life, Lena remained safely in the country due to my previous disruptive actions. My different behavior from the previous life prevented Leonard from peacefully taking Lena abroad to marry and have a child. Compared to the child, they now prioritized the property. After all, it was not a trivial amount but assets worth billions. Lena shamelessly hooked up with Leonard to bear his child, also eyeing his billionaire fortune. Like her mistress mother Vivian, she was adept at scheming. I calmly invited the three to sit and personally poured them boiling water at 100 degrees to serve him. Richard, Vivian, and Lena were not there for tea. Richard took the lead, hypocritically expressing concern for a few sentences before mentioning the company. "Iris, you don't understand the company at all. It's best to maintain the status quo. Your mother-in-law has it hard, and you're not short of money now. There's no need to strain relations like this." I tugged at the corner of my mouth, my gaze falling on Lena. At this point, the child in Lena's belly should be over 3 months old, right? To climb the social ladder, she really went to great lengths. She even conceived a child. If Leonard could father children, ours would have been running around long ago, so whose seed was in Lena's belly? Seeing me staring at her, Lena immediately forced a smile. "Sister, Dad is doing this for your own good. The company is thriving now. If you and Aunt create a scandal over inheritance, it will affect the stock price. We're all your family, acting in your best interest. I hope you'll listen to us." I nodded. "You're right. The company is Leonard's life's work. It's the fruit of his efforts. We can't let negative news affect the company." Hearing my response, joy flashed across the faces of Richard, Lena, and Vivian. In the next second, I abruptly overturned the coffee table in front of me. The scalding water on the table splashed over Richard and his family of 3. They grimaced in pain from the burns. I suddenly leaped up and lunged at Lena, delivering a heavy slap to her face. "You wretch! Who are you calling sister? Does my business concern a mistress's daughter like you meddling?" Lena's cheek swelled. I grabbed her hair and beat her relentlessly. Who gave you the audacity to mock me in front of my face for losing my husband? You think you can laugh at my expense? Dream on. Even in death, I won't let you see me as a joke. After slapping Lena several times, I picked up the nearby baseball bat and swung it at Vivian and Richard. You bunch of ill-intentioned scum, all coveting the property in my hands. I tell you, Leonard's company will belong to him forever. No one can take it away. From now on, I'll hold the company firmly. Anyone who dares scheme against it, I'll fight them to the death. After a flurry of blows, Richard fled in disarray with his mistress and Lena. This beating prompted Lena to be rushed to the hospital immediately, but the child in her belly was unharmed. After all, my aim was merely to teach her a lesson. As for the child in her belly, it was best for it to be born alive and well, just like in the previous life. After all, it would only be interesting if the child was born. Vivian and Lena gained nothing, and after confirming the child in Lena's belly was fine, the group convened again to strategize. They were now anxious, fearing I would truly claim Leonard's shares and act detrimentally to the company. In the video provided by the private investigator, Leonard frowned, smoking incessantly. Only when Lena coughed from the smoke did he extinguish the cigarette. If it comes to it, I'll have to appear. You can't appear. If you do, all our previous plans will be ruined, Vivian and Lena both objected. Iris is so mad. If she learns Nuan is pregnant with your child, she'll go all out, right? If things escalate, it's bad for everyone. This matter should be handled privately. The private handling by these two vicious women, Vivian and Lena, was to kill me, stimulating me to suicide as in the previous life. The private conversation between the two vicious women was eavesdropped by the private investigator. Lena maliciously said to Vivian, "Mom, Iris loves Leonard deeply. In her current mad state, I reckon it won't be long before she loses control and commits suicide. We just need to stimulate her and wait patiently. After all, Iris still holds a large portion of the marital property. Once she's dead, we'll become the legitimate heirs and can divide her assets." What if she doesn't commit suicide? Vivian countered. Lena confidently replied, "She will. Don't worry. If she doesn't die by the time I give birth, we'll find a way to kill her. After all, her madness is already known, so pushing her to make it look like suicide would be logical, and no one would suspect." What vicious hearts these two wretches had. They not only coveted Leonard's property but also mine. This was likely why Margaret incessantly provoked and stimulated me in the previous life. They assumed I was still the ignorant, devoted Iris from the previous life who loved Leonard unconditionally, thinking killing me would be effortless. This was ideal. Under Vivian and Lena's dissuasion, Leonard abandoned the idea of returning. Meanwhile, I posted photos of Leonard daily on Instagram and other social media, captioning, "I don't believe my husband has left me. He will definitely return. I will guard the company for him. No one should scheme against it. No one." My posts on Instagram and social media increasingly convinced Leonard that I loved him to death. Loving him so much, I would surely forgive his infidelity. When he resurrected, I would accept him as before. With this confidence, Leonard refrained from interfering in the inheritance division, allowing me to swiftly obtain half of Leonard's shares. On the day I obtained the shares, I called Leonard's arch-rival Ethan. "Mr. Ethan, can we meet?" I expected Ethan to refuse, but he surprisingly agreed. We arranged to meet at a club under the Ching family. I arrived at the club private room half an hour early without makeup, expecting Ethan to be late. However, upon opening the door, I saw Ethan already seated, waiting for me. Ethan lounged on the sofa, fiddling with a string of familiar-looking prayer beads. Seeing me, the notoriously temperamental Ethan, who never gave face to anyone, nodded proactively and gestured for me to sit. Since Leonard and Ethan were archenemies, I had no prior interactions with Ethan. In fact, I had once spoken disrespectfully to him because of Leonard. Uncertain if Ethan would agree to collaborate, I treated it as a last resort. Failure would cost nothing. Without preamble, I stated my purpose directly. "Today, I seek Mr. Ethan to discuss a business deal." "I know, you want to sell the company shares in your hands to me, right?" Ethan's words startled me. Was he a mind reader? How did he know my intentions? I subconsciously asked, how did you know? I know many things. Ethan chuckled lightly, including that Leonard and Lena have a child, his faked death, and that you hired private investigators to probe them. Hearing Ethan, I nearly jumped up. You. Don't worry, I have no intention of exposing you. I can collaborate with you, but I have one condition. What condition? Ethan's gaze fixed on my face. After a while, he uttered 6 words, I want to marry you. What? I, who had just sat down, stood up abruptly. You're mad? I'm not mad. As long as you marry me, I'll help you with whatever you want. With so many young and beautiful women, why marry me, this wilted flower? Ethan grasped my hand. You're not a wilted flower. In my heart, you're an angel. The angel who saved me from the mire. His gaze was focused, containing emotions I didn't understand. Not being inexperienced, I recognized the affection in Ethan's eyes. He was a city's most famous diamond bachelor, handsome, wealthy, talented. Women who liked him could line up from the south to the north of the city. Moreover, rumors claimed Ethan avoided women, so how could he like me, abandoned by Leonard? He must be joking. Or perhaps he wanted to toy with me? After all, I had previously embarrassed him because of Leonard. Rumors said Ethan was vindictive, those who offended him never fared well. Perhaps sensing my intense thoughts, Ethan sighed and handed me the prayer beads he was fiddling with. Look at this. I took the beads, saw the engraving clearly, and was startled. Isn't this my lost prayer beads? How are they with you? You've forgotten? You don't remember me at all? A hurt expression flashed in Ethan's eyes. I was truly bewildered. He slowly reminded me, 20 years ago, on the winter solstice in South City, didn't you rescue a destitute mother and son on the street? You gave them a bank card and told the little boy who had just lost his father to be strong. 20 years ago in South City, my only relative, my biological mother, unable to accept Richard's affair with Vivian and the birth of their illegitimate daughter Lena, chose to slit her wrists and commit suicide. That winter solstice was extremely cold, with biting winds. Having lost my mother, I wandered the streets aimlessly. Then I saw a destitute mother and son crying over a man who had just passed away. It turned out this pitiful pair had just lost their family's breadwinner. The lame woman and young child cried heartbrokenly over their future after losing the man. I stood on the street watching them cry, tears streaming down my face as well. They cried for their future livelihood, while I cried for losing my mother. That year, at only 8 years old, I clearly knew that without a mother, even with abundant money, it was useless. I would be targeted by the mistress and her daughter, living like a weed. Perhaps I would end up like my mother, killed by the mistress and her daughter, meeting a tragic fate. Thus, I handed the bank card in my hand to the grief-stricken woman, telling her there was money in it, and she could use it to raise her son. I wanted them to live well. Memories flooded back. I stared at Ethan in disbelief. It was unimaginable that this handsome man with an overwhelmingly powerful aura was the dirty, tear-streaked little boy from 20 years ago on the street, eyes full of bewilderment and pain. Fate is truly unpredictable. The little boy I helped 20 years ago had grown into a powerful tycoon, now extending a helping hand to me. I suddenly recalled why I dared to approach Ethan for negotiations. In my previous life, I had seen his goodwill toward me. At that time, devastated by Leonard, I was in constant pain. A renowned psychologist proactively visited to treat me. The psychologist mentioned being commissioned by Mr. Chung. Could that Mr. Chung be Ethan? I also recalled that before my suicide, I had a severe car accident. It was Ethan who sent my bloodied self to the hospital. I further remembered that in several business confrontations between Leonard and Ethan, they always ended with Ethan's concession. Ethan had never failed in his previous moves. Did he concede because of me? My mind was filled with previously overlooked past events. Opposite me, Ethan looked affectionately. That day, I picked up your dropped prayer beads and learned your identity. I swore to repay you. Unfortunately, I was a step late. You had already married Leonard. Ethan placed the prayer beads on my wrist. Iris, I know what you're planning next, I'll help you. Marrying me is the fastest and best way. Ethan explained that by marrying me, he could legitimately take over all the shares in my hands through our spousal relationship and operate without alerting Leonard. He added that if I was uneasy, he could transfer equivalent shares from his company to me. What did I have to worry about? The money in my hands was enough for several lifetimes. What I urgently desired now was to reduce Leonard and his despicable mother Margaret to poverty. To make Lena and Vivian, this mistress mother-daughter pair, realize the consequences of failed schemes, living worse than death. Ethan and I obtained the marriage certificate the next day. Though it was a marriage of convenience, Ethan prepared everything properly. He gave me a 20-carat pigeon blood diamond ring as a wedding ring and arranged dinner at the most sought-after private kitchen. Flowers, violinists, and all my favorite delicacies were present. I ate until my belly was round. As I prepared to leave satisfied, Ethan said he had prepared a surprise for me. Guided by his arranged personnel, I arrived at the door of a private room in the restaurant. Inside, disguised Leonard, Margaret, and Lena with her mother were having a farewell meal. Tomorrow, Leonard and Lena were to fly to the United States. During this dinner, Margaret ate while instructing Leonard and Lena on precautions. Besides taking care of themselves, they must absolutely care for the precious grandson in Lena's belly. As they spoke earnestly, noise came from outside. You can't go in. We have rules here. Non-guests are not allowed to disturb diners. I raised my voice. I'm not a non-guest. The diner inside is my mother-in-law. Isn't it natural for me to see her? Sorry, guest. We need to consult the diners inside before letting you in. Hearing my voice, the wretches inside were stunned. Leonard stood up in panic. How did Iris come? How did she find this place? Could she know about my fake death? How is that possible? We've prepared for so long, and Iris never noticed. How could she know the truth now? Maybe it's just a coincidence that she passed by? Vivian said. Leonard also didn't believe I knew the truth. Regardless, she can't see me. I'll have the waiter stop her from entering, Margaret immediately said. As her words fell, I shouted outside, Mom. Mom. Why won't you see me? Though Leonard is dead, I'm your only daughter-in-law. You'd rather dine with that wretch Vivian and her mistress daughter than see me. What do you mean? Are you plotting inside how to deal with me? That wretch Vivian hooked up with my dad and caused my mom's death. Now is she hooking up with you to kill me and seize my property? I tell you, if you don't see me, I'll wait outside forever. I'll call reporters and media over, explain why you ignore your daughter-in-law and befriend this Mistress Vivian. I shouted loudly outside, drawing diners out to see. Leonard's death was still a hot topic, seeing me rant without composure, like a madwoman. Outside, discussions buzzed with various comments. Pitiful, Iris was such a gentle person before, turned into this because her husband died. Indeed, she's traumatized. After all, she and Mr. Leonard were a famous model couple in the circle. Without a husband, unloved by her mother-in-law, with a stepmother mistress who's no good, she must be paranoid, fearing harm. Hearing the discussions outside, Vivian and the group's faces turned green. My commotion couldn't be ignored, they had to respond. It seems we can't end this without letting her in today. Leonard, leave through the window and hide first. Vivian decisively instructed Leonard to escape via the window. The wretch's private room was on the first floor, with low windows. Escaping through the window was indeed the best option currently. Lena stood to open the window. Leonard climbed onto a chair, stood on the sill, and jumped down. As his feet landed, he let out a heart-wrenching scream, ah! Leonard never dreamed that beneath the restaurant's window would be animal traps covered with shattered glass and various sharp objects. With his leap, both feet were caught in the traps. The pain was excruciating, he immediately screamed. Not only that, the shattered glass and sharp nails underfoot pierced his feet, blood gushing, causing unbearable pain. Hearing Leonard scream, Margaret and Lena rushed to the window. Seeing his, they were shocked. Margaret, heartbroken, cried, "Call an ambulance quickly." Immediately. We can't call an ambulance. That would make it public knowledge. We can't waste all our efforts. Vivian immediately stopped her. Then what? Can't you see how much pain Leonard is in? What if he dies? I'll arrange bodyguards to take Leonard away first. Vivian promptly called the bodyguards. Vivian's bodyguards arrived quickly and immediately took Leonard to the hospital. After witnessing her son being taken away, Margaret angrily opened the private room door. What are you doing? Iris, what exactly do you want? Even when I'm having a meal, you cause trouble. Will you let people live? You eating is no problem, but why dine with this shameless mistress Vivian and her illegitimate daughter Lena? Aren't you the one who hates mistresses and illegitimate children the most? Why befriend this shameless mistress Vivian? Have you been bewitched by this mistress mother-daughter pair? Did they convince you to turn against me? Margaret tried to interrupt sternly. What nonsense are you talking? Who is a mistress? Iris, your mad ravings suggest you need a psychologist. I'm not mad. I tell you, that wretch Vivian is no good. She hooked up with my dad and forced my mom to death. Now she's approaching you to flatter you, surely to use you against me. Tell me, what did she say to you? Vivian's scandalous affair with Richard was well known in South City. After relocating to a city, fewer knew that history, and she thought she had whitewashed herself. By publicly exposing her past and seeing diners filming the spectacle, Vivian's face turned green with anger. Iris, you've gone too far. Daring to spout lies to slander and ruin my reputation, see how I teach you a lesson today. I was waiting for her to teach me. Vivian lunged furiously to hit me, and I met her with a resounding slap. Seeing Vivian and me fight, Ethan's arranged personnel immediately intervened. Naturally, they blocked Vivian, leaving her only to be beaten. How could Lena sit still? Disregarding her pregnancy, she came to help, then coincidentally was grabbed by the hair and pushed heavily onto the table, not injuring her belly but causing Lena's head to bang on the table. Then she fainted. Seeing Lena unconscious, Vivian and Margaret panicked, worried about the child in Lena's belly, hoarsely shouting to rush Lena to medical care. Thus, Leonard and Lena were sent to the hospital one after the other. Leonard was discreetly taken by bodyguards without alerting others. But Lena was different. An ambulance cleared the way, rushing recklessly to the hospital. Within 2 minutes of Lena entering the emergency room, the news of her 3-month pregnancy spread everywhere. The scandal of a wealthy heiress pregnant out of wedlock successfully aroused public curiosity. Especially upon learning that this heiress's mother was once a prominent hostess at Heaven on Earth in South City, and her dramatic history of hooking up with Richard, getting pregnant, and forcing the original wife to death. The trending searches exploded. Videos and photos of Vivian dancing provocatively in nightclubs and mingling with countless men flooded the internet. Even anonymous short videos began spreading everywhere, invariably featuring Vivian as the protagonist, with men changing daily. Their authenticity was hard to verify, but one thing was certain: as the top card in the nightclub, Vivian was far from pure. Like mother, like daughter, with the mother ascending as a mistress, under Vivian's influence, daughter Lena must have learned well. Everyone began speculating which CEO's child was in Lena's belly. Suddenly, prominent ladies in a city became anxious, checking if their husbands had any involvement with Lena. All feared the child in Lena's belly was their husband's. The trending searches persisted, completely ruining Lena and Vivian's reputations. Richard angrily called to roar at me. I tossed the phone aside, letting him shout. He hung up after exhausting himself with curses. Emotions don't withstand tests. Richard, this adulterous scumbag, was initially attracted to Vivian's youth and beauty, and her so-called helplessness. He always thought Vivian was a pure lotus emerging from mud. Now, seeing the spreading short videos of Vivian, Richard began doubting Lena's paternity. He arranged for a paternity test. On the other side, after being hospitalized, Leonard's both feet had bones crushed by the traps. After a lengthy surgery for his severe injuries, he finally regained consciousness. Opening his eyes, he grabbed his phone and saw the negative news about Lena and Vivian. Leonard was so angry he nearly spat blood. Why was this happening? Clearly, before his relationship with Lena, there were no negative rumors about Vivian and Lena. Nor had Iris spoken ill of them. Leonard always thought Vivian and Richard were legitimately together, never imagining it was a mistress ascending. No wonder Iris's relationship with Lena was always very cold, and she basically had no contact with Richard, so that was the reason. Leonard felt some regret, but things had reached this point, he needed a child. Iris hadn't given him a child in 6 years, he had finally gotten Lena pregnant, and this hard-won child couldn't be abandoned easily. The current plan was to first have the child born, then cut ties with Lena, bring the child back for Iris to raise, claiming it was adopted from an orphanage. He had a coping strategy. While the reputation ruined, Lena's phone was bombarded, social media flooded with countless abusive messages. Some even tracked her whereabouts, splashing manure and throwing rotten eggs. Lena could no longer stay in the country. After discussing with Leonard, they chartered a plane and hastily fled to the UK to avoid the storm. As soon as they left, the company's share transfer proceeded orderly. Leonard dared to fake his death and leave because he entrusted the company to his most trusted person, Caleb, to steer. He wasn't afraid of Caleb's betrayal, as he held lethal leverage over Caleb. However, Leonard miscalculated one thing: if he could know Caleb's leverage, others could too. When, accompanied by Ethan, I threw documents of Caleb hiring assassins and drug trafficking onto his desk, he immediately switched sides. Besides Caleb, the company had other confidants and key personnel of Leonard. Ethan and I broke them one by one, and soon they surrendered. I knew this was all thanks to Ethan, one of the city's most powerful figures currently. Leonard's confidants surrendered so quickly because they feared Ethan, not me. The company share handover was exceptionally smooth, completing the transaction in less than a month. All shares were acquired by Ethan, now only those in Margaret's hands remained. Ethan wanted to use extraordinary means, but I refused. I told Ethan that things had already satisfied me up to this point. Margaret's shares must be preserved, as I was waiting to watch a grand spectacle. This show would only be entertaining after Leonard and Lena's child was born. Time passed so slowly. By calculation, there were still 6 months until Lena and Leonard's child was born. Waiting always caused anxiety, after all, with unknown factors. To avoid anxiety, I began finding things to do, such as shopping, beauty treatments, and afternoon tea with friends. I even started frequenting nightclubs, drinking and dancing, many things I never did in my previous life. Every time I went to nightclubs to drink and dance, I encountered Ethan. He wore a shirt tucked into his pants, hands casually in pockets. He watched me from a distance, not too close nor too far. His handsome features attracted many women's attention, but none dared approach for contact information. Ethan was too cold, exuding "strangers keep away." Only when I was drunk or being unreasonable did he show a helpless smile. He escorted drunk me home and handled many sleazy men at the nightclub for me. Leaning in the passenger seat of his luxury car, watching Ethan drive attentively, something stirred in my heart, tickling. I realized Ethan was truly very handsome. Especially when he smiled, he looked exceptionally good. I admitted I was captivated by his looks. So when Ethan invited me to dinner at his home, I didn't refuse. I thought it would be just Ethan, but unexpectedly, his mother was there too. 20 years had passed, the once helpless woman's face was now lined with wrinkles. Seeing me, she smiled, wheeled her chair over, and grasped my hand. "Thank you, Iris, thank you for saving us mother and son back then." Dinner was prepared by Ethan himself, simple 4 dishes and a soup, all my favorites. I thought I'd feel awkward, but unexpectedly, I was at ease. Ethan's mother was very gentle, her kindness dispelled all my guards. Leaving Ethan's villa was already 10 at night, he drove me home. As always, he gentlemanly helped buckle my seatbelt. Perhaps due to the glass of red wine that evening, I was slightly tipsy. As Ethan leaned over, my hand involuntarily tousled his hair. His hair was thick, dense, black, and shiny, feeling as good as I imagined. Impulsively, I asked, "What shampoo do you use?" Ethan didn't answer. As he straightened, he suddenly changed direction and sealed my lips. What followed was natural. I didn't dislike Ethan, so I accepted his further advances. We were very compatible, he showed me what true ecstasy was. So this was how enjoyable intimacy between man and woman could be. Married to Leonard for 6 years, I had never experienced such profundity. I fell in love with exercising with Ethan. The consequence was that one morning, I suddenly felt nauseous in my stomach. I vomited in the bathroom for a while. My stomach still soured and uncomfortable, I had no appetite for anything. Thinking I had a stomach ailment, I went to the hospital for a checkup. The results showed my stomach was normal. The doctor reminded me, "Are you pregnant?" Prompted, I went to obstetrics and gynecology for blood and urine tests in one go. The obstetrician told me, "Congratulations, you're pregnant. For weeks, the baby is normal. Do you need to establish a file?" Having not conceived for 6 years, I nodded dazedly. Of course, I needed to file. After all, this was my child. As I filled the file card there, hurried footsteps came from outside. Turning, I saw Ethan rushing in without composure. "Wife, we have a child." "Yes." I nodded, feeling something off. Why did he call me wife? We were on the same certificate, calling me wife seemed right, and the child was Ethan's, ours, no mistake. Then why did it feel wrong? Only when Ethan carried me to his Maybach and to his luxury villa did I realize. Weren't Ethan and I in a fake marriage? How did we end up with a child? Could we still divorce? Divorcing wouldn't disadvantage me. After all, at marriage, Ethan said half his fortune was mine. But the child couldn't lack a father. Children from single-parent families probably aren't very happy, right? I'd observe Ethan's behavior first. If he's good and not messy, I could accept the child having such a father. If not, keeping the child without the father was viable. Days passed like this. Pregnancy days were unbearably miserable. I couldn't eat anything, vomiting whatever I ate, losing a lot of weight. Ethan devised ways to get me food. Driving late at night from South to North City to buy specified snacks was normal. I'd salivate when he went, but upon return, I'd shake my head after not eating a bite. He remained cheerful without a trace of anger. In this mix of pain and joy, my little baby in the belly reached over 3 months in a flash, and my morning sickness improved much. Ethan always made time to accompany me for checkups, unfailingly preparing nutritious meals for pregnant women daily. When the child in my belly was 5 months, good news came from Leonard and Lena hiding in the UK. Lena gave birth to a child, a healthy 8-pound boy. This was great news. The story was finally nearing its end. I was eager to see the pleasing expression on Leonard's hateful face, so I asked Ethan to do something for me. The benefit of marrying a powerful husband was that whatever I asked, he executed quickly. Just a day later, Leonard was revealed to be alive, appearing in the UK. Leonard and Lena appeared together at a UK maternity hospital giving birth. Photos and videos of them happily holding the child spread across the internet. The biological father of Lena's child, guessed unsuccessfully for months, was finally revealed. No one expected it to be Leonard. Wasn't this the classic scumbag and wretch? Vivian shamelessly hooked up with Richard, causing my mother's death. Now her mistress daughter followed suit, hooking up with my husband and bearing an illegitimate child. The public outcry was predictably intense. Wave after wave of trending searches exploded online. The devoted husband image Leonard had cultivated was as admired as the backlash was severe. He and Lena became objects of universal disdain. Omnipotent netizens began digging into Leonard and Lena, uncovering all details of their affair. The trending searches persisted, implicating Margaret and Vivian as well. Initially, they dared not go out, but couldn't stay home forever. Every outing, their cars had tires punctured, windows smashed, interiors thrown with dead rats, snakes, and various reptiles. Some even breached security to splash paint, feces, and send funeral wreaths at their villas. News about Lena emerged endlessly. Insiders exposed videos and photos of Lena previously hooking up with wealthy heirs. Lena always wanted to marry into wealth, but due to Richard's struggling company and her arrogance, she remained single these years, neither achieving high nor settling low. Lena was unwilling to be lonely. Seeing me married to someone like Leonard, she wanted a man comparable to him. Thus, she targeted prominent wealthy heirs in a city. She used all her wiles to hook several, some ignored her completely. Some were playboys, free offerings not to be missed. They even filmed such videos for amusement. Then explosive videos suddenly appeared online. The men were mosaicked, unseen, but Lena appeared fully from head to toe. Seeing such videos, Leonard's mood was imaginable. Already disdainful of Lena due to her mistress-daughter status, he now despised her more. Originally planning to return after the child's full moon, Leonard waited no longer. He flew back hurriedly from the UK with the child and a nanny. He left without notifying Lena. Upon learning of Leonard's departure, Lena desperately chased back. On Lena's return day, media swarmed the airport, treatment rivaling top celebrities. Besides countless sharp questions, she was splashed with excrement by people waiting outside. Videos and photos of Lena standing disheveled at the airport entrance exploded another wave of trending searches. I slept soundly at home. Upon waking, Ethan had prepared delectable food. I devoured it, grease dripping from my mouth. The phone rang suddenly at this moment. Ignoring it, I continued eating. After ringing several times, a message came. "Iris, it's me, Leonard. I know you've learned the truth now and must be very angry." "Iris, I'm sorry. I betrayed your trust. I had unavoidable difficulties. Let's meet and talk it out, okay?" Leonard's return didn't prioritize finding me, he went to the company first. Upon arrival, he discovered things differed from his expectations. The company had changed personnel from top to bottom. His confidants had all vanished. Attempting to enter, he was blocked by security. The guard eyed Leonard sideways. Our boss said, "Leonard and dogs not allowed." Leonard was embarrassingly driven out. He immediately called his confidants, all calls unsurprisingly unreachable. At this point, Leonard felt inexplicable panic. But he held a glimmer of hope. I was the company's largest shareholder. Having loved him so much, with a little scheming, he could make me change my mind. Thus, Leonard messaged me, urgently needing to meet and explain. After eating my fill, I replied Leonard with an address, my current home with Ethan. If not dazed, Leonard should associate something with this address. Unfortunately, I overestimated him. Now in chaos, he rushed over holding Lena's child without further verification. When the doorbell rang, Ethan was massaging my legs. Pregnant, my legs were swollen. The doctor said frequent massages were needed. Ethan specially learned massage techniques, serving as my professional masseur. Hearing the doorbell, Ethan prepared to open. I stopped him. "Let me." Having waited painstakingly until now, with the mystery about to unravel, I naturally wanted to do it personally. I wanted to see Leonard's splendid expression firsthand. I was truly impatient. The door opened. Leonard smiled. "Iris." His following words unspoken, his gaze shifted from my face to my highly protruding abdomen. Leonard's expression turned from bewilderment to shock, finally paling entirely. You're pregnant?" "Yes, 6 months." I gently stroked my belly, appreciating Leonard's transformation. How is that possible? Aren't you unable to bear children?" Leonard said this very unconfidently, his voice dropping several octaves. "Who said I can't bear children?" "Leonard, you didn't think the lack of children in 6 years of marriage was my fault, did you?" I laughed, a liberating laugh. "Leonard, the one unable to conceive has always been you. You're congenitally sterile. You're a eunuch, you'll never have children in this lifetime." As my words fell, Leonard retreated several steps. He still held the not yet full-month infant. "Impossible, this is my child, I can conceive." "Huh." I laughed even louder. "So the blame is on me?" "Leonard, the child coming from whose belly, the father may not be certain, but the mother is the only truth. You should admit that, right?" Looking at Leonard's ashen face, "You couldn't have a child with me in 6 years, yet a brief hookup with Lena got her pregnant. Don't you find that strange? Who gave you the confidence to think you could impregnate a woman in one go? If you had that ability, would I have drunk Chinese medicine for 6 years and undergone checks for 6 years?" Leonard retreated 2 more steps. I looked down at him. "The last time your mother forced me to eat ants for fertility, I couldn't endure it. My check results were normal, so it had to be your issue, thus, I secretly sent your sperm to the hospital for testing. The doctor told me you're congenitally sterile and will never have your own child. He kindly suggested adopting if we really wanted one. Leonard collapsed to the ground holding the child, unwilling to believe, but forced to. I kindly reminded, get a paternity test, that's the best solution. The paternity results came quickly. Leonard rushed the child to 3 institutions, drawing blood thrice. Actually, during the blood draw, he already knew the outcome. After all, he was type A blood, Lena type A, but the child he held was type B. 2 type A's could never produce type B. Leonard knew the cruel result. But he didn't give up, perhaps an exception? He paid extra for expedited testing. Then he and Margaret waited for the results. After over 10 hours, they came. The child had no relation to Leonard. All 3 institutions gave the same result. Leonard collapsed on the spot. Margaret cursed in rage. But unable to change the cruel fact, the mother-son pair disbelieved Leonard's infertility. They went to hospitals for Leonard's tests. Results matched what I said. Margaret went berserk, roaring to Vivian's home to confront her. Previously close partners finally turned hostile. They cursed each other with the most vicious words, then fought physically. Neither Margaret nor Vivian held back. They fought from inside to outside, then tumbled down the stairs grappling. A bang sounded, like cracking a watermelon crisply. Bright red blood gushed from Margaret's head. She lay beside the steps, hands scratching randomly a few times before slowly drooping, then motionless. The ambulance didn't arrive in time. Margaret stopped breathing. Vivian was taken by police. They reviewed surveillance, deeming it an accident. Vivian didn't intentionally kill. But Leonard hired lawyers insisting on intentional homicide. Results didn't follow Leonard's vision. With identity cancelled, Leonard was an ordinary person. He tried returning to the company for his shares. Yet he saw Ethan in what should be his CEO seat. Only then did he learn that during his faked death accompanying Lena's delivery, his company had changed owners. If Lena's child was his, he might feel better. After all, his sacrifices would have some return. Unfortunately, he toiled in vain for so long. Company gone, mother gone, child unrelated. Leonard couldn't accept this. Subsequent events unfolded naturally. He ambushed with a knife on the path Lena, Vivian, and Richard must take. The shocking triple homicide in a city thus occurred. Leonard was arrested. Death penalty was certain. While awaiting death, he commissioned a lawyer to see me. I went to the prison. Leonard had aged much, hair white, no longer the spirited man. I slowly picked up the phone. He choked, "Iris, I'm sorry." Sorry was too late now. I wouldn't accept Leonard's apology. I came today not to ease his conscience. I wanted him to die unrestfully. Leonard, do you know karma exists in this world? For your impending death, I'll tell the truth. I come from the future. I know about you and Lena. In the previous life, you killed me, leaving no remains. In this life, I've come for you. I'm very satisfied with your current fate. After speaking, ignoring Leonard's expression, I hung up. Turning to leave, I vaguely heard sounds behind. I didn't look back, just gently supported my belly with my hand, walking forward step by step, never turning back. Outside, the sunshine was perfect. The familiar Maybach door opened. A tall, long-legged, extraordinarily handsome man opened it, smiling as he ran toward me. I threw myself into his arms, hugging his waist. "Ethan, it's great to have you."